welcome to the stage Carluke Pink. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome here today from Carluke's team. We are the Pink team, if you couldn't already tell from our outfits. Sports is a massive part of young farmers, with it allowing members to take part in a variety of activities. Our chosen topic for today is it is too expensive and too difficult to take up sports. On our team, we have our arbiter, Miss Laura Hunter.
Good morning.
We have our opposer, Miss Joanne Hall.
Good morning.
Who I'll introduce more fully later on. Our proposer for today is Miss Barry Hall.
Good morning.
Barry is 26 and is a full-time PE teacher. She's also heavily involved in young farmers, with being chair of Lanarkshire and vice chair of West. Barry, like myself, was sports convener of Carluke Young Farmers. She also takes part in Highland dancing and takes part in the occasional Hydrox. I'm sure she's knowledgeable on our sports topic today. So let's hear some of Barry's proposing arguments for a topic that is too difficult and too expensive to take up sports. Over to you, Barry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As you heard, I am here today to propose the motion that it is too difficult and too expensive to take up sport. As a PE teacher, you might be surprised to hear me say this, but unfortunately I am disappointed in the lack of support we get as a population to take up sport, and instead have unmanageable costs, limited availability, and rising obesity rates. Firstly, the cost factor is huge. To take up many sports or gym classes to attend anything, it costs money. Firstly, you have to pay for your class or your training session before you even start thinking about the equipment or dress code that you might need for that equipment. For me, it was Highland dancing. That was my sport growing up, always was. I now see how fortunate I was that my parents paid for me to attend dance classes 4 times a week. A lot of money to spend when it came to the Highland socks, my full kilt, a Highland jacket, to then travel me all around the country to compete in this sport. That is so fortunate that I was able to do it, but it is not the case for everybody. I work with young people in my school who, one of the main things they say, I can't afford that, or I'm not going to be able to take that sport up. That's not what we want to do. We want to encourage people into these activities and sports. Hyrox is one of the competitions, as Karen mentioned, I've taken part in. Something I was surprised to force myself into in the gym. But this year I had to say no more, with £254 being the cost to take part in a pairs Hyrox competition for 1 day, for 1 hour, to make yourself sweaty and run around the pitch, before you buy the matching outfits. Secondly, the limited availability and resources. It depends on your local area and what is there. If you're in Stranraer and you've got the ice rink on hand, then look where our Olympic team came from. They're mostly Stranraer bound because they had an ice rink on their doorstep. But what about if you live in a more remote area with very little availability, or the only thing is rugby to go take part in, and you're not really that interested? How are we taking people and making them see all the wide variety of sports if it just depends on what happens to be in your hometown? Thirdly, obesity rates. Obesity rates are rising, as we can all see, with 1/3 of adults being obese in our current times. This shows that we are not getting our population involved and taking up sports and activities. This figure should be decreasing if we are letting people continue sports, getting them into it. Yes, when I teach them at school from that young age and they're all excited, suddenly they lose it as they go through. And then by the time they're adults, so few of us are getting involved in sports, unless you're one of those mad Winter Olympics throwing themselves off mountains. So, I absolutely believe that it is too difficult and too expensive to take part in sport. This needs to change so that our population can be happier and healthier. Thank you.
Thank you, Vary, who had plenty of strong arguments there to convince us that it is, in fact, too difficult and too expensive to take up sports. Some being that rural areas have less access to them, and the benefits of sports to us. However, waiting patiently here, we have Miss Joanne Hall. Joanne is 28 and is a full-time architect. Joanne is also chair of Comms and Marketing for National Committee, so you'll find her often doing interviews at our sporting events with our athletes. Joanne, as well as Vary, is a keen Highland dancer, and Joanne also takes part a lot in curling. Let's hear some of Joanne's opposing arguments to tell us why it is not, in fact, too difficult and too expensive to take up sports. Over to you, Joanne.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I must say, it was interesting hearing my proposer argue against sport and accessibility when she's a PE teacher. How many of you played a sport, perhaps at school or maybe young farmers? Were you perhaps bullied into joining your club hockey team for tomorrow? Today, I'm here to oppose the argument that sport is difficult and too expensive to get into, using the points young farmers, schools, and the all-important free great outdoors. My first point is the very reason that we are here today, Young Farmers, the largest rural youth club in Scotland with 72 clubs across the nation. Are you perhaps taking part in football, hockey, or maybe the bowling last night? All just for the cost of your annual membership. That's not to mention netball, curling, carpet bowls, and our talent spot is so hard this year, I think it should be classed as a sport. My second point is sport within schools, where many schools have mandatory lessons within PE right up until 6th year, encouraging pupils to take part in all sports. Then there's after-school clubs, national school leagues, and then when you head to university, you can find many hockey, netball, basketball clubs. And I'm sure they're not just in it for the university club socials. Now, I wouldn't say that I'm the sportiest person. I hated netball at school, and I'm very thankful that I found my sport of curling. And, more importantly, the most popular sport in Scotland, running. Running is on the rise, with 12% of people trying to get out on a run once a week, a fact that has actually doubled since 2011. In the UK, we have 265 park runs across the country, every Saturday offering free local community groups and a group 5K. There's even one in Inverness, but the team didn't take it up when I suggested we do that before this. Besides that, there's many run clubs throughout the week, again encouraging more people to get into the free sport. Then, to also quickly mention my personal favourite, the free Walk Highlands app, encouraging people across the country to get out for a local walk. And even our own national chair climbing 56 Munros last year. And again, I felt very strongly encouraged to join her. To conclude, through Young Farmers, through schools, and through our outdoors, I do not think that it's expensive or difficult to get into sport if you want to. In fact, why not join me in going and supporting the football teams after this, and we'll see how many people are taking part. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. I think my plan is maybe to go to the pub after this, but we'll see. She had some knowledgeable opinions there to tell us why it is in fact not too difficult and not too expensive to take up sports, listing a lot of routes into them via Young Farmers. I would now like to return back to Vary to reply to our opposer and to add to her side of the argument. Vary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Of course, Young Farmers is one of those rare groups that we do have access. But being on the committee, I can tell you it is getting harder and harder. Halls and pitches are becoming more and more expensive. Hockey used to be quite a big thing in our club, and then then recently we get one tournament every now and then because we can't book anywhere for practices. Costing up to £60 for a pitch that you can only book 1 week before is not much use to us. Joanne also mentioned the great outdoors, which of course I get. In Scotland, why wouldn't you want to go out and climb a hill in the dark and dreary rainy days that Joanne has dragged me on? But on top of that, you also have the new walking boots, the make sure you have a nice waterproof jacket, the bag to go with it, or your walking poles, all at an expense. You need to be prepared to be in the outdoors in Scotland, and that does not come at a small cost. So of course, all these things that we mentioned, there is still a downfall, and the expense and difficulty is absolutely still there. Thank you.
Thank you, Vary. Now that we have plenty of strong arguments on our motion today, I would like to take this to a friendly debate. We will stay seated for this and we will return to Joanne first. Joanne.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Vary, you mentioned the cost of equipment. I think we have places like Facebook Marketplace, Vinted, that you can actually get second-hand walking poles, boots, like pretty easily.
Thank you. Joanne, Vary?
I do remember Joanne buying her new fancy Hawker running trainers for £110, which is not what I spend on my new running shoes that I use for work, although they do get a bit wrecked using them day in and day out.
Joanne?
Thank you, Vary. I will admit that was a want, not a need. I think you can find some cheaper trainers available online. I just personally wanted the Hawkers.
I would like just to jump in that for young farmers, we mentioned that it's such a good activity to take part in. But as soon as you turn 30, suddenly these opportunities disappear. You're not taking part in the netball, you can't take part in the hockey. So suddenly you go from being out at young farmers, taking sports 5 days a week, to then absolutely nothing. How is that any benefit?
Madam Chair, Vary, I feel like there's growing rates of clubs that are available for older people as well.
Thank you. Thank you to both our speakers. Unfortunately, that is all we have time for. Finally, I would like to turn to our arbiter, Miss Laura Hunter. Laura is 26 and is studying health and food technology to become a teacher. Well, she's very knowledgeable on nutrition. When I asked her to take part in our sports tournaments this year, I didn't often get a yes. I've also heard that Laura actually forgot to cancel her gym membership this year. That must have cost her a penny. Anyway, Laura has been listening carefully to both of our speakers today and will now give her opinion on who she thought put forward the best argument today for a motion that is too difficult and too expensive to take up sports. Laura.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure you will all agree that Vary and Joanne spoke with fire and passion on today's topic. It is too expensive and too difficult for people to take up sports. You know, I actually seen young farmers out at the Inverness park run this morning, and I would have totally loved to join, but unfortunately I had to be here today. Firstly, Vary argued for the motion by saying that yes, it is too expensive and too difficult for people to take up sports. She began by highlighting the sheer cost associated with partaking in sports and how it can be unrealistic for many of our young people in today's society. She added further fuel to the fire by discussing limitations of facilities for people to take part in a wide range of sports, especially those living in rural areas. Thank goodness you've stopped doing those hierarchies, because I was worried you might convince me to do it too. Next up, Joanne argued against the motion by saying that no, it is not too expensive or not too difficult for people to take up sports. She started with a bang by saying that young farmers is an accessible and low-cost way to take part in exercise. And she backed up this stance by pointing out that schools, universities and community clubs offer sports to everyone, often part of a weekly routine. My sports and young farmers include being goalkeeper at netball, super sub at tug of war, and managing to down a pint in 30 seconds. For our speakers, it was then on to the open debate, where our speakers' true colours really shone. Joanne started with an attack on Vary by arguing that second-hand equipment can make sports cheaper for all. But Vary fought back by bringing up the fact that young farmers can be restricted with its age range. I'm sure you have all worked out by now that our speakers today are sisters, and if they're arguing like this here, you can only imagine what it's like in the House. Whilst both speakers gave very convincing arguments, a winner must be decided. There was just one point regarding the fact that we are all here today competing in sports and skills for a low fee, that when mentioned I could fully agree with, and therefore solidified my decision in making Joanne the winner. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, who decided that Joanne put forward the strongest argument for our motion today. All that's left for me to do is to thank my speakers and my arbiter, and of course you, the audience, and the judges for listening. Now, is anyone going to watch the football today, or are you heading to the pub? Thank you.